Hi guys, it's Kelly Latevola here, and I'm back with another video for Neat and Tangled. Buckle up, Buttercup, this is going to be a long one. So I actually started doing this, if you remember my last video where we did the alcohol ink comparison. That's what my intention was, to do one is like a sky and one is like a water scene. So I actually filmed this portion of it quite some time ago. So you'll probably notice a distinct difference between the two. But that's just kind of where I was. I also showed you the dies. My intention was to use the dies, but then they got misplaced in my move. Thankfully, they did turn up, but of course it was after I already had finished the card, because, you know, Murphy's Law. If it can go wrong, it will go wrong. But moving on. So I'm using Neenah 80-pound solar white cardstock, stamping down an intense black ink from Simon Says Stamp, because I am coloring with Copics. So I picked some warm grays to do my airplane with. This is the So Fly, which I think is such an adorable name, stamp set, which is new for July, and I just totally think it's adorable. I have a son. If you watch my channel or have watched me here on Neat and Tangled, you may have seen some of his videos that he's helped me with. And so I just think this is super cute and something that I could totally make cards for him with. But then also, you know, for other people. So I actually, when I was going through, like I said, my original intention was to do a sky background. And then the more that I worked with the alcohol inks in the last video, I wasn't really feeling it. I wasn't really feeling like it looked like a sky. I felt like they both looked very water-like. So then I just switched, and I was like, okay, well, I've already colored this, so now what am I going to do? And I started looking at the stamps that I owned, and the topography stamp actually kind of jumped out at me. And I was like, how cool would it be to have this look like an aerial view? And so that's the route that I went. I have adjusted my microphone, but I have not completely unpacked my craft room. And as many of you on my channel have suggested, that probably the echoing is because the room isn't full of items. Well, it is full of items. It's full of boxes. Lots of boxes. Not really looking forward to that. But, so it might be a little bit echoey. I apologize. I don't really have anywhere else to do the voiceovers. The house isn't particularly large. So anyway, I picked the warm grays because there's a little elephant in the driver's seat who is just such a little cute guy. I think he's super cute. I love his little trunk. Anyway, so I wanted him to be cool grays, and I wanted there to be a distinct difference between the two. So that's why I used the warm grays, because I know we don't frequently see those in my card. I much prefer the cool grays. So just going through and doing the shading like I typically do, as if my light source is in the top right corner. That's just how I roll. You can do it however you prefer. Don't pay attention to a light source. If you want to pay attention to a light source and you're new to it, my suggestion would be to find the one way that works for you, and then always use that. So if you're top right hand corner like I am, then your shadows will be to the bottom left. If you want to do the top left-hand corner, then your shadows will be to the bottom right. If you do a center light source, then your shadows will be to the left and the right. That one's probably the most popular because I think it's easier. So anyway, yeah, so I just thought, I don't know, I just thought the aerial view would be just super adorable. And you know what, like, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I was totally right. Like, I really love the way the card came out, even though it looks a little bit different than what I would normally do, because normally I wouldn't do a busier background, but I'm so glad that I tried it because I think it looks awesome. For my draft here, I did pick like my go-to E50 family, but since I want him to look more yellow orange-ish, I'm actually going to achieve that by just bringing in one YR, which is YR24. I felt like it matched really well with those E50s, and it's enough so that he doesn't look like a brown draft. Yeah, this video is so, oh my gosh, this video is so long. And I didn't mean for it to be, it just kind of happened that way because it's all Copic coloring. I really like being able to do a card and do the ink blending in the background, because not only does it save me on Copic ink, it's also much faster to get saturated color. But sometimes it's just not the way that the card works, and that's not the way that this one worked. I needed to do some color blocking, and it was easiest to do it all with Copics. So again, here I'm doing the light sources. If it was in the top right hand corner, there would probably be more shading along his neckline, like where his head's kind of hunched over. But you know what? I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. The card's still cute. I don't think anybody's going to notice if I didn't point it out. So we're moving on past that. For his little hair here, it's a mane, probably a mane. Giraffes have manes. They do now. I'm just going to use the tip of the marker and very light pressure to do some flicking, especially with once we get into the darker colors, just to create some texture there so it doesn't look like the same texture as his body, which would be, you know, shorter hair and smoother. I want his mane to look a little bit more unruly, I guess. I don't know. I have I have naturally curly hair. I come by, like, my sister has like the most beautiful straight, well, I got one with wavy, and then my middle sister has like the most beautiful straight dark brown hair with like all these beautiful natural auburn highlights and everything, and it's never crazy. Both of my parents have naturally curly hair, and so do I. That's part of the genes that I just got. And I call it my lion hair. Like when I have to wear a curly, I call it my lion hair because it looks like I have a mane. It is just so large. And even though I use product in it and like the diffuser and, you know, dry it on the cold setting, I've never tried the plopping thing. Basically plopping is where you use like an old t-shirt because it's soft, and leave your hair, like put product in your hair, leave it wet, plop it into this t-shirt, tie it around your head, and sleep like that. And it's supposed to be like these amazing curls, but I don't think I could sleep with a t-shirt wrapped around my head. So never tried it. Anywho, well, we're just totally completely off topic. I call my curly hair my lion mane because it's just wild, just absolutely wild. I wanted to do the red accents because in the background, for the topography that's going to be back there, it's mainly going to be blues, greens, and browns. Lots of that going on. There'll be some clouds to break it up. You can see I stamped a bunch of them. There's a couple of different sizes that are included in the stamp set, and I stamped them all. Speaking of the clouds, we're moving on to those now. I always color my clouds the same way. I like to create a little bit of detail and a little bit of movement in my clouds. So the way that I do it is wherever the two meet, so like where like the scallop edge of the cloud is, I draw myself like a little whirl. This is definitely a more whimsical approach to clouds, but I feel like this is a more whimsical set, so that kind of fits. If you have a more like, I guess you're coloring something more realistic, I would not recommend this technique to you for clouds. But anyway, I usually start with my C marker, and then I go in and add a couple of different colors. Typically they're, you know, blues, purples, pinks, blue greens. If you get too hard of an edge, you can go in with a colorless blender and just kind of go over them. It'll soften everything up. And then I did even like all of them that way, even the small ones. I just kept my little whirls smaller, and you're not going to get every place that the two lines meet. It's just not going to work that way. There's only so much real estate on a cloud you can cover. Color is the correct word there. So just going to show you a couple more of those. And like I said, you know, I would definitely stick to the lighter colors because you still want them to appear white. I also add, like, if there's no room for a whirl, sometimes I'll add a little bit of shading to like the bottom of the cloud to just get some more color in there. I'm going to use the same RV00 that I used in the clouds on their ears. And then using my white gel pen, there's like nail, I don't want to call them holes, I guess. There's like nails on the side of this thing, on the side of the plane. And so I'm highlighting those. And then also the wing of the plane and the propellers. Um, I'm just drawing like one white line, and that, because that shine, quote unquote shine look, would actually cut right through all of the designs. I like to outline all of my images. I'm using an EK Success writing pen to do that, so it's a bold black line before I cut them out. Moving on to this topography stamp set, which I have to tell you, I always want to call it topiary. I don't know why. Topiary, if you do not know, is the art of trimming hedges into shapes. Think Edward Scissorhands, if you will. I don't know, it's just because the way that they're spelled, I want to mix one up with the other. These two things are not the same. I just don't know how to use words correctly. Well, the first time I stamped this is comical. So I'm stamping in Barely Beige ink from Simon Says Stamp because I need the lines, but I don't want them to show through at the end. So the first time that I stamped this, I stamped it and it came out like, oh, like a dark gray. And I was like, clearly I put this stamp away without completely cleaning it. I don't know if I'm the only one who ever does that, but sometimes I'm just like rushing to get my things done, and so I just throw it back in the stamp set, and then I forget to go back and clean it, and then, you know, I get punished because when I want to use it again, things like this happen. So I just had to stamp it twice. No big. For the actual background, so I wanted it to look, like I said, like they were flying up above, you know, like a wooded area, with, you know, like a lake running through. And so basically all I'm doing is I'm just randomly picking sections, and I do mean random. I was trying to get a little bit of each color, like where it would make sense. I didn't want to do too much of the brown. I really wanted the green and the blue to be the star of the show. And so I mapped them out, and I'm doing the lightest color all over. This whole area will be my brown area. This is just how I found it to be the easiest plan of attack, I guess, to get where I was going. Eventually, I'm going to speed it up once I show you the gist of what I'm doing, because this video is still super long. So going through and color blocking those. Yeah, I don't, this part of the card reminds me of, I'm going to date myself here. So I use a white Sakura gel pen. That's what I use on my cards. When these first came out, I was in high school. And they were like the bomb diggity because they are opaque on so many surfaces. One of the things that they're opaque on are your hands. Like, you can write with a Sakura gel pen on your hand and it will be opaque. So I have always kind of been creative, artsy, all of those things. And when I used to write my friends' or boyfriends' notes in school, yeah, I know you're shocked that I didn't just completely pay 110% attention when I was in school and get, you know, all the straight A's. I didn't. Yeah, school was a struggle. Anyway, so I would write them notes, but I would spend, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes on drawing their name with gel pens, markers, highlighters, just 2 different colored pens if that's all I had. And then I would, you know, write the note in like 30 seconds because the bell was about to ring, kind of thing. So one of them, when the gel pens first came out and we realized we could write on hands, so like people would come to me, like people that I didn't even, like wasn't even really friends with, in school, and they would ask me to draw or write their boyfriend's whatever name on their hand so that they could walk around with this like art, like this piece of art on their hand. So I went through a lot of gel pens in high school, just like tons, and I got to be creative, so it didn't bother me to do it any. But one of the things that I really liked to do back then was outlining. So I would draw their name in whatever color. So let's just say green. And then, so the whole name would be green, whether it was bubble letters or script or whatever it was. And then I would start outlining it in other colors so that it had almost like, I don't know, like this 60s vibe, like that it, or 70s, where like this rainbow was like coming off of the name that was drawn on their hand. So that's like pretty much what I'm doing here is I'm just drawing a one dark section and then following the, like, you know, just picking the next set of lines for how far I wanted the next color to come out, and then just outlining the whole thing, and then going back in with the next color and then just outlining that whole thing. So it reminded me very much of being in high school and doing those things for, you know, I mean, that's really, I mean, I spent so many minutes, hours, whatever, in school doing those drawings because I was in this, it was, I guess it was like a trade. It was called Administrative Office Associates. And so basically we called it AOA. And what AOA is, you know, just teaching you like secretarial skills. And the way that it was the only one that was not in the career center. So it was still in the high school, and you had to apply to get in. And then your junior year, you would spend your second part of your day. So like after lunch to the end of the day would all be spent in AOA. And then your senior year, the beginning of the day, so first period to lunch would all be spent in AOA. And then the rest of your, you know, day would be regular classes that you needed to graduate. Or in my case, classes that you didn't go to because apparently you didn't think graduation was a real thing that you'd have to be responsible for at some point. True story. Side note on the card. So when I went through and did it the first time, it wasn't as saturated as I wanted it to be, and it looked very, I mean, it just looked streaky, and I was not a fan. This is why it's important that you make sure your Copic markers are filled, so that way you don't have that like streaky look. And there was a couple through here that I did have to go, like I have to break from the card and go in and you know, fill those up because I had let them get to the point where they were relatively dry. And then so I'm just going to keep going back over all of the things. I colored each one of these twice, so including the green and the blue. I'm only going to show them to you once, just so you can see how I kind of selected the lines, which was, I promise you, totally random. Was just trying to get enough of all the colors on there. Super easy technique because it's just color blocking. We're not blending at all, like 0% blending. But anyway, so in AOA, I was with the same set of girls, you know, which obviously then, you know, you become friends, you hang out all the time, you do all the things together. We did, you know, prom together, we got jobs together. Though, I mean, everybody I was actually telling a friend this the other day, like everybody I went to school with worked at Mark's. And if you're from Ohio, you probably know what Mark's is. It's a local chain. And everybody worked there. I worked there for one day. I worked at Mark's for one day. Who has a job for one day? I worked there for one day, and it was basically miserable. Like, I was like, I don't know how you people do this all the time. Like, stocking shelves is not for me. I much prefer talking to people. And so then, what did I do after that? I think I went and worked at Dollar General, I think is what I did. But anyway, so I spent all the time with the same girls. So, like, every morning, you know, they would come over at the desk with the gel pens and I would draw them the things, or if they had a class assignment where they needed to do poster board, which is kind of actually still true to this day because even at work, like if there's something that needs to be made that's like poster board, they just come ask me to do that. So yeah, I guess being creative sometimes spills over into my real life. Here was one of the times where I had to stop and go refill the marker. My B04 was pretty dry, and you don't want to, now do as I say, not as I do, right? Like a typical parent. Um, uh, you don't want to keep forcing the marker to try to produce ink. If it's dry and you keep like scrubbing at your paper, you're gonna ruin your nib. That's just fact. And sometimes I do push the envelope because maybe I'm feeling very lazy. That's pretty typical. Or maybe I don't have a refill for that color, so I'm just trying to make it stretch. If that's the case for you, just pick a color that's similar that you own. I promise you, at the end of the day, like when the card's done, nobody is gonna notice. So, like I said, in the move, the dies for this got misplaced, and I much would have. I'm being honest. I would have preferred to use the dies, but that's not what happened. So I had to fussy cut them. Fussy cutting really no big for me because I've been doing it for so long that I don't even notice necessarily a difference. But if you have the dies for this, I would definitely use the dies. Since I did the fussy cutting, I have these raw edges. Two ways that you can kind of clean them up. You want to use a water-based marker. For me, my border is black, so I'm going to be using a black marker. If you have a more intricate cut like this is for the actual fly guys, you can just put it down on a scrap piece of paper and trace it, and the edge of the marker will catch your paper and do the same exact thing. For the clouds, I just held them in my hand and ran the marker around the edge. I always go from the back side in case the marker slips off. I have ruined one too many images like that. I know better than to do it from the front side, so save yourself the heartache. For the sentiment, I wasn't really sure if the sentiment I wanted to use, which was Adventure is Calling, was going to fit, because they're two of the larger ones in the topography. I almost called it topiary again. The topography set. So I actually stamped out 3. I treated the black cardstock with my Inkadikadu embossing bag, and then stamped it down in Versamark. So I stamped the Adventure is Calling, but then I also stamped a slightly smaller sentiment in case I needed it to finish out the adventure part. Do you know what topiary makes me think of? Topiary makes me think of The Shining. Isn't that a weird association to make? Side note, trick I learned from Laura Basson, who's amazing. I'm sure that you know that. If you don't know that, go look up Laura Basson, because she's totally adorable and you'll fall in love with her personality because she's amazing. Not to mention her card designs are also completely fantastic. But anyway, I'm using a paper piercer to clean up my edges for my embossing because it's just so teeny tiny and it fits in there perfectly. I mean, she was so smart, just such a smart woman. So then I heat set that, and then I started putting my card together. I'm gonna have some of the clouds popped up, the sentiment popped up, and the my little flyers here. So back to this, The Shining thing. So do you remember I love Stephen King. Stephen King's my favorite author. And so I've read the book multiple times. But if you haven't read the book, the movie was obviously Jack Nicholson was super popular back in the 80s. But in that movie, there's a maze. It's a topiary maze where all of these different animals are carved out of, bushes, trees, what have you. And they actually come to life it's a horror. Okay, if you haven't seen it, it's a horror movie. So that makes sense. Trees don't actually come to life. But anywho, I messed around with this little flyer here for a while trying to find it exactly right. And then I had already put the foam tape on it. So my little propeller had too much foam tape on it. And so I had to go in and just kind of remove this one little piece so that I could put glue on it, and then that would sit on top of my sentiment flush. I want you to know that when I was putting the card together, you can see all the clouds laid out here, I put them where I wanted them, and then I took a picture with my phone. That was basically the best way I could figure to get them all back in the same areas that I wanted them to be. I also used the trick of, since I used Tombow Mono Multi Glue, it's repositionable if you let it dry, so it's just slightly tacky on the back. I use that trick all the time to hold my parts in place so that I don't have to chase them all around my desk. So I just, put them where I want them and kind of tack them down with that repositionable portion of it. And then once I know where they're going to go, I can go back in and use the glue while it's still wet, and then it's permanent. I learned when I was doing the Create It, Take It at Create for Me Entangled at the Create was put on by Simon Says Stamp, that not a lot of people love liquid glue. And I didn't really know that because that's pretty much all I've ever used. I super love it. I love this glue. Tombow Mono Multi Glue is amazing. So anyway, this is the whole card. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you are having a wonderful week, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.